We ended the last session talking about how long the amped up state lasts when we're under the influence of PEA. And I told you not forever. It has a lifespan of about 18 to 36 months. And I want you to think back too about Theodore Reich and how he explained that over time there were day-to-day disappointments that would taint the relationship, and that the pedestal upon which we placed our romantic partner might eventually crack and they would tumble to the ground. And it could be that the timing of the drop in all of those feel-good chemicals that are in our body hits us just about the time that we start to become in touch with the reality of the situation. It's an interesting effect, or perhaps a bit of a perfect storm to test the relationship. Of course, neurotransmitters are not the only substance that are at play regarding human sexuality and the related behaviors. The role of testosterone is highly implicated in our sex drive. Both men and women have this hormone, though men generally have much higher levels of it. In general, high levels of testosterone are associated with high levels of sexual interest, and low levels of testosterone with correspondingly low levels of sexual interest. Females, when they're given testosterone, they not only become more interested in sex, they also tend to exhibit higher levels of aggression and competitiveness. Women that are highly competitive in some areas such as sports and work life, and I do mean those that are highly competitive, also tend to have higher levels of testosterone as well. So all this then begs the question, if high levels of attraction tends to peak the production of some substances in the body, what then is responsible for triggering this initial attraction? We know there are cultural factors, that people have at least some tendency to choose similar socioeconomic partners, similar race, and some people will choose also based on religious affiliation. So to a great extent, the choice of a partner can be cultural. But we know there are some biological cues as well. We equate facial symmetry with desirability. The more symmetrical the face, the higher is the tendency for the subject to rate it as attractive. This is thought to be due to an inherent instinct to choose partners that are healthy. The healthier a person is, the more likely they are to have facial symmetry. And of course, that's just one of many factors in health, but one of the few that can be instantly picked up on just meeting someone during the first few seconds of interaction. Interestingly enough, people can pick up signals through body odor too. In a series of experiments that have been replicated over and over, researchers had men and women smell the t-shirt of someone who is the opposite sex, a t-shirt that had been worn overnight by the other person. The subjects of the study, let's just call them the sniffers, gave the shirt the sniff test and rated the desirability of the smell. Of course, they were given no information on how the other person looked. The sniffers ranked people who had more symmetrical facial features as better smelling. What is even more interesting is that women who were ovulating, meaning that they were in the point of their menstrual cycle where they were more likely to get pregnant, those women had the most acute sense of smell regarding which t-shirts were worn by the more symmetrical wearers. And universally, there's a preference for certain waist-to-hip ratio in men and women. So while in some societies it might be more acceptable to be heavier or thinner, universally there's a desire for a certain waist-to-hip ratio for men or women. Women are most attracted to men that have a waist-to-hip ratio of 0.9, meaning that their waist is 90% of the size of their hips. And men are most attracted to women that have a waist-to-hip ratio between 0.7 and 0.8, or that their waist is about 70 to 80% the size of their hips. And not surprisingly, these waist-to-hip ratios are associated with fertility, meaning that this is the waist-to-hip ratio that is most often seen during the most fertile times of a human's life. Psychologists also speak in terms of sexual motivation, And by this, we'd be referring to how we change our behaviors in order to achieve certain goals, including behaviors that will make it more likely that we'll find a partner for obtaining sex. Why we want sex and who we choose for that will have a great deal to do with the kinds of sexual behaviors we hope to achieve, what kinds of fantasies that we have about sex, or our romantic fantasies, and what kinds of feelings we think we should obtain from the relationship. And just from a purely sexual satisfaction perspective, from a more conventional sex, of what we experience during sexual activity, that can be defined too from just the psychological perspective of different components of arousal, from the external stimuli, one's imagination, as well as physiological activation within the body. So there's some aspect of interplay between the mind and the body when it comes to sexual activity. The stimuli and the imagination trigger the body to a great extent. And what is initially attractive can be considered in a broader sense than just visual or olfactory, as in the t-shirt study. What men and women say they want in a partner is very complex and encompasses a broad array of characteristics, some of them physical, some psychological, some social, as well as economic. And according to these two slides, women and men do not rank the same characteristics in the same order. The first four, mutual attraction, dependability, emotional stability, and maturity, and a pleasing disposition, all rank in the same order for men and women. After that, there's some variation in the characteristics that are desired by either men or women. Regarding what's desired in facial characteristics, there is quite a bit of variation from one culture to another. There are some general facial characteristics that are desired by all societies. Symmetry, larger eyes, with larger pupils being considered very sensuous, high eyebrows, prominent cheekbones, a smaller nose and chin, and a big smile being something that are desired by most men in most cultures. On the other hand, women tend to prefer larger eyes, stronger cheekbones, a broader chin, and a larger smile. I want to shift gears a little bit from the physiological to the more emotional aspect of pair bonding over time. Psychologists speak of the idea of interdependence, and that this is something that can bond couples together over the long haul of a relationship. When couples get to the point that they realize that only this one romantic partner can provide certain things they want in a relationship, then this kind of interdependence develops. These kinds of rewards that partners tend to seek are things like unique intimacy, familiarity with the partner, comfort, and mutual respect. Long-term commitment also tends to be associated with investment in the relationship. The higher the level of investment in the relationship, the more likely the commitment will be as high as well. And when I speak of investments, I'm speaking of a broad area, and not just economic or financial investments, but rather assets the individual has devoted to the relationship and cannot be easily recovered or replaced. It might include ties to the family, shared history and understanding, or emotional intimacy. So this could refer to tangible things like the home, joint accounts, cars, or intangible things like relationships, trust levels, and emotional comfort and trust. And finally, I want to say that psychologists have noted that love can change over a lifetime. It might start out as passionate love, but then over a period of time, 20 years or longer, might take a totally different form. So that would describe the movement from passionate to compassionate love. They would entail very similar feelings, concern for the partner, high levels of emotional investment in each other, and a desire to be very intimate and maintain a high level of trust. But there is often a change in sexual desire when love moves from passion to compassion. When love is more compassionate in its orientation, then there is not the same level of obsessiveness, preoccupation, nor the same need for constant contact. So now we've concluded the last lecture in our course on human sexuality. I've tried to help you see both the cultural and the biological aspects of human sexuality. We've explored theories, psychological, sociological, as well as the biology and hard science that contributes to understanding this aspect of human behavior. I've helped you to understand the historical aspect of this topic too, as well as some of the political dimensions. We looked at social institutions as well and considered their role in human sexuality. And we examined how technology presents new ways of doing things and new opportunities, and how challenging it can be for social norms to catch up with our new technologies. I hope you've enjoyed the lectures and found them to be interesting. And above all, I hope that they've challenged you to new ways of thinking about a topic that many people think is governed strictly by biology. And maybe just one or two of you are so intrigued that you'll take some more sociology courses. And shameless plug, I teach diversity and inequality and juvenile delinquency and would love to have you on board with those classes too. Have a great end of semester, and beyond all else, never, never stop learning.